I don't think most people have ever seen what they're actually capable of. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack courage, but because life has never demanded enough from them. Human beings are strange creatures. We say things like, I couldn't handle that, I'd never survive that, I'd break. But here's the interesting thing about it. Almost none of us have ever actually been tested. There's an illusion of knowing your limits. So let me ask you, how do you know where your breaking point actually is? Really, how do you know? How do you know when you're going to break? Is it when you start to feel uncomfortable? Is it because you quit? Is it because you failed? None of those tell you where your limit is. They tell you where you stopped, where you chose to stop. You had a little bit of discomfort and you quit. You had a little bit of self-doubt and you quit. Or you failed. You tripped up, getting to the finish line, and you didn't get back up. None of those tell you where your limit is. They only tell you where you chose to stop, and there is a difference between the two. Life tends to prove us wrong. Think about the moments people never volunteer for. No one says, I hope my spouse dies young. No one says, I hope I lose my job. I hope I become unemployed. I hope I lose my home. I hope I become responsible for my aging parents. I hope I have to rebuild my life. I hope I have to rebuild my life after a divorce or something terrible happens, a hurricane destroys your home. Nobody hopes for any of those things, yet millions of people do exactly those things. Millions of people do those things. And it's not because they wanted to. It's not because they woke up in the morning and said, hey, I want to have a catastrophe happen in my life. They do those exact things because they have to, because life demands it of them. And then something really remarkable happens, and it happens so frequently that it's just wild. They survive. People survive. People move on. People get stronger. Sometimes they even become stronger than they have ever imagined, that they ever thought was possible. I was driving the other day on the highway, and I always get a little bit too close to the zero mark in my gas tank. And this time I went a little bit too close. I actually went into the reserve tank, and I kept going. I had the courage to keep driving on the highway with seemingly no gas. Now, of course, there's an extra 20 to 80 kilometers past your 0 point. But every vehicle has a reserve tank. And every person has a reserve tank. Most of us never touch it. Because we never need it. We've never demanded it of ourselves. You don't discover your reserve by reading books. You don't discover your reserve by getting motivated at someone else discovering their reserve. You don't get to discover your reserve by watching videos of David Goggins. You discover your reserve when there's literally no other option. When you've been too foolish to check your gas tank driving on the highway, but then you decide to look down and all of a sudden you notice you have 1 kilometer left in your range and you got 20 kilometers to go before you find a gas station. That's when you discover that there's actually, thank God, a reserve tank. Let's look at some examples. Parenthood. It's very often said that nobody is prepared for becoming a parent. They think they are, and then the baby comes and they lose sleep. In fact, it's not only lose sleep, they don't have any sleep. They're solving problems that they never even knew existed. They're making sacrifices for work, for family, for friends, for health. that they swore they'd never make. How our assumptions change when we realize that there's a little person that depends on us. So where does that capability come from? Is it magically created? No, it's not. It's always there. Of course it's always there. Now what about grief? I'm sure you've lived this. You could say every person who's experienced devastating loss has probably said at some point, I can't do this. It's a stage of grief. Then somehow they find the strength to attend the funeral, make the phone calls, they return to work, they cook dinner, they breathe in, they breathe out. Not because these things are easy, they're very difficult under grief, but because human beings have just an astonishing ability to endure. Marcus Aurelius said, the impediment to action advances action. Sometimes suffering doesn't reveal weakness. Sometimes suffering reveals strength you didn't know existed in the first place. Look at soldiers who routinely carry injured teammates hundreds of meters while exhausted. If you asked them the week before, could you do that? Could you carry that 250-pound man, 100 meters? They'd probably say no. Until reality asked it of them, until the universe said, this is your duty and you better damn well do it. And then there's lots of everyday heroes. Not astronauts or Navy SEALs. What about the single mother? What about the nurse working 12 hours? A 12-hour night shift? What about the mechanic working overtime? Not because he wants to, not because he necessarily has to, because his boss is forcing him to, but because he has to feed his kids. What about the man quietly caring for his wife that has dementia? They're not superheroes. They don't wear a cape. They're just regular people whose life circumstances demanded more. Now here's an interesting question. Why don't we know? Why don't we know what our capacity is? Why don't we know about this reserve tank? It's because our minds confuse comfort with capacity. As soon as something feels even a little bit hard, we think we've reached the limit. But discomfort isn't the edge of how far you can push yourself. It's just the beginning. It's just the first signal that this is challenging. Think about lifting. Think about the first rep that burns. I think it was Bruce Lee that said he only counts the reps after you start feeling the burn. The first set that burns, the first rep, it doesn't mean you're done. It means you're starting. This is the start. This is certainly where growth starts. Now let's connect this with the Stoics. Of course, we have to. We're obligated to. The Stoics never promised comfort. You'll never hear any Stoic promise you comfort. But they did promise being prepared if you follow the principles. Epictetus did not say, hope nothing difficult happens. He said, train yourself. Be ready, because someday something difficult will happen. If there's one true statement, it's that one. Someday something difficult will happen. Now, the purpose of philosophy, the purpose of Stoicism, it's not to become impressive. It's to become ready for life's challenges. Now, I want to be clear that this does not mean that trauma is good, per se. Trauma is actually an indifferent. Loss is very unpleasant. Illness is very unpleasant. War is very, very unpleasant. But humans possess an extraordinary ability to respond to unpleasant things. That's different. The event might not be good, meaning the experience might not be pleasurable, but your response can be. What if you've underestimated yourself your entire life? I got to say that again. I need you to hear me on that one. What if you've underestimated yourself your entire life? What if you've mistaken comfort for capability? What if the strongest version of yourself isn't someone you build, but someone difficult circumstances reveal? I have a prayer for you. I hope life never asks more of you than it already has. Life is hard, and I would by no means wish for you to have a harder life. But if it does, history suggests something very remarkable. Human beings almost always discover they had more to give than they ever believed. Maybe, just maybe, that's true of you too.